whoever it is that you are studying from, trying to get some tidbits, which is all well and good. Don't try to be them because you are not them. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. And that takes time. It takes time to develop the methodologies and the things that work for you. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. This is Mike Howard. It's Monday morning. It's been a few weeks since I've podcasted, just been really busy with some other things, but needed to get back into it. So happy to be back here in front of you, talking to you about a lot of different things as we do on this podcast. And really want to thank you for spreading the word about the podcast. Our viewership is growing, and that's obviously due to all of you who are continuing to spread the word about the podcast. But if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps in the algorithms and helps us to get more buzz about the podcast. And remember that I've got 3 books out now, working on my fourth. I've got The Art of Ronin Leadership, my first book. Second book, The Art of Ronin, of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies. And then my third, which is out now, is Full Circle. And it's an action thriller with a character by the name of Jack Trench. It's gotten some really good reviews. Just got a real good review on Kirkus Reviews, which is one of the most popular as well as well-respected book review sites. And I'm busy working on the second Jack Trench novel as we speak, called Blood Promise. So please, please get copies of the book. They're great gifts as well. But I think whether it's the leadership books or the action novel, Jack Trench novel, I think you'll enjoy it. And please, I would like feedback on the books as well. So I was thinking about what I want to talk about today, and one of the things that is top of mind today is just on the art of speaking. I've written about speaking in my blog. I've got a blog on LinkedIn, and I talked about that, and also in the book, especially the art of Ronin leadership and the art of executing Ronin leadership strategies. I touch on how important it is for leaders to be able to speak and to give speeches and be able to talk in public and be able to express oneself, I should say, in a manner that is persuasive and gets the word out in terms of whatever messaging you want to get out. Now, we all know, as they say, that one of the biggest fears that people have is public speaking, and I can understand that. And as I was growing up, I never wanted to do the oral presentations in school, right? I was the person that, if you had a choice between oral presentation and written, I always do written. Hated to get in front of people, and it wasn't until later in life, when I was in the government and doing some teaching, that I was forced basically to to get in front of people and speak. But even then, it was more instructional, and it wasn't giving a speech in front of a large body of people. When I got to Microsoft, obviously as an executive, that's part and parcel of your job. A lot of you who are executives or in leadership positions well know that being able to speak in public, and whether it's a staff meeting, whether it's a division level meeting, whether it's at a conference, industry event, what have you, the art of speaking is vitally important for um, uh, for leaders. Now, I'm not going to go over something that I've talked about before in terms of how I learned to be comfortable in speaking, how I prepped for speaking for my very first major speech, which was in Seattle. But what I want to touch on today, just for a little bit, is speaking styles and how you should be comfortable in your own skin, right? So one of the things that people do when they are trying to hone their art of speaking is to listen to other speakers. When I first started out, I would listen to people I thought that made great speeches, like, John Kennedy or um, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, um, the late Congresswoman woman from Texas, Shirley Chisholm. Um, these were all great speakers, and they're inspirational in how they speak, but they all come at it different ways. And so, number one lesson is do not try to be somebody else. Don't try to be Barack Obama. Don't try to be Ronald Reagan or whoever it is that you idolize. Colin Powell, it was another one. Excellent, excellent in giving speeches. But whoever it is that you are studying from, trying to get some tidbits, which is all well and good, don't try to be them because you are not them. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. And that takes time. It takes time to develop the methodologies and the things that work for you. For example, I remember when I first started doing speeches, typically you have, you've got your audience in front of you, and you've got, your cheat monitors that are here. Usually, if it's really well equipped, the place that you're speaking at, you've got a timer, but then you've also got whatever notes that you're referring to for your slides. And one of the things I realized early on was I was lousy with the note thing. There are some people like my former boss who was he was really great at having notes, being able to speak to the slide and being able to refer to the notes. For me, it was a distraction. Looking at notes and then trying to then get back to the topic, at hand or the slide that was behind me. It didn't work. And I tried that a few times and the speeches were okay, but they could have been better. And then, came up with, you know, what worked for Steve Jobs when he was running Apple, and it was basically pictures. So whatever concept he was trying to get across, you'd have the picture, right? And the picture would then uh, get the juices flowing in Steve's mind, and then he'd be able to talk about whatever the concept or thing he's trying to get across on the slide. So I started doing that, and that worked for me. I didn't have to keep looking at the notes and see, okay, what is it? I could have a slide, for instance, let's say I'm trying to think of an example. Um, yeah, so there was a slide. One time I did a talk on the relationship between the chief security officer and the chief information security officer and how that needs to be really strong in any enterprise for end-to-end security. And so I think we had a slide which showed like Batman and Superman together, right? So rather than have, 3 or 4 or 5 lines down here on the cheat slide, the note slide, talking about how important it is and what are the ways that you can strengthen the relationship and what are the pitfalls if you don't have the relationship. I just saw Batman and Superman. And then from there, I could just talk to it. I say, hey, look at, Batman and Superman. They're both superheroes. They both have their own lanes, but when needed, they get together and use each other's strengths uh, in their respective fields uh, to go up against a common enemy. And so being able to talk to that with just the slide and not the notes really worked for me. Some of you may really like using notes, and if that's your thing, that's fine. You should do it. For me, that didn't work. So over a period of time, it just became really comfortable for me. Put a slide up, maybe some words on there, but very few. Mostly pictures, and I think that also keeps people's attention because if you got lines of bullet points on a slide, they're going to be reading the bullet points while you're talking. And the worst thing I hate when speakers just speak to bullet points, because the audience can read it. So your job as a speaker is to keep the audience engaged. So for me, what works is, like I said, you have the image, and hopefully it's a cool image that people look at, and then you go to the talking points, and then you speak to them. So yes, they like the slide, but then they're listening to you. They're not just reading a bunch of stuff on there, right? Um, and so that was kind of a big game changer for me. But again, you experiment with the style that works for you. with different styles, I should say, and then find the one that works for you and be comfortable in your own skin. So another thing about speaking is the whole idea of uh, humor. Some people are really good at telling jokes. I'm not one of them. I'm more of a extemporaneous kind of speaker, when it comes to humor. Some people come out and they're really good at telling something funny up front as an icebreaker, and then the audience laughs, and then you kind of get on with your subject. That was never my thing. What I do is I found out over the years that I'm really good at gauging the audience. And when I usually come out, I usually, welcome, say thank you for having me. Really pleased to be here to talk to all of you, and hopefully we'll get some interaction going. And looking forward to the Q&A, because Q&A to me is the best part of making a speech anyway. Um, if something strikes me as funny, uh, then I will go with it, right? I don't try to put in a funny joke or something like that. I just go with the flow. Um, if there's a bugaboo on the slide deck, and I can't get the click to work, I'll say, hey, this must be Google trying to sabotage this, the Microsoft PowerPoint here, or something like that, right? So for me, I'm able to look at a situation with the audience, and make light of something, or have self-deprecating humor. That works for me, but telling jokes doesn't. And for other people, they're really great at being able to tell a joke or a couple, stories, and that type of thing. And for me, it's more, when it happens, I know that this is a great time to say something funny, because it is. I think it's important. If the worst thing is to just go through the whole speech and no one's laughed and no one's chuckled. I'm not talking about laughing at you, laughing with you, because if they don't do that, is it boring? Are they not getting it? Do they not agree with what you're trying to get across to them? So, for me, being able to have some humor interjected in your speech is important, and it draws the audience in, and it helps with that interaction. But again, find your own style, because one size doesn't fit all. And again, this is something that's going to take time. You're just going to have to work with it and experiment with it. Again, don't try to emulate um, other people. President Obama was a master at that, at being able to take a situation, see that, oh, this is a great opportunity to make light of it, or something, and turn that and get that laughter going, and then get back to the talking points. You just have to figure out what works for you. Again, another thing, and it may be a small thing, but it really isn't, is what are you comfortable with in terms of where you are on stage? Typically, there's a podium with a microphone, like what we have here, a microphone, right? And as I started, I actually remember my first speech. It was a thing called the Great Conversation in Seattle. It's a big event of security industry leaders. And I remember there was a podium, I believe, with a mic, as I can remember, but it was a huge stage. And I remember I didn't like being behind a podium. I never have, and unless I'm forced to sit or stand in front of a podium or behind a podium and speak to a microphone, I avoid that at all costs. I would rather be mic'd up and walk across the stage. For me, that physical barrier of a podium psychologically keeps me separated from the audience. And I want to be as close to the audience physically, as well as, from a speech making standpoint, as I can. So I just love, I That was my Ring camera. I should have turned it off, you know. But yeah, I like walking back across the stage, and that way I can, look left, center, right, walk across, and just really, to me, that engages. It also keeps me flowing, right? It energizes me to walk across the stage and talk to people, and instead of just standing behind a podium. Now, for some people, they really enjoy. They don't like doing that other stuff. They like being behind the podium and speaking that way. And you can still do, left, center, right, back and forth. And that if that works for you, that's great. For me, I'd rather be mic'd up and I'd rather walk around and engage the audience that way. It just works for me. Um, and I also think it keeps people engaged as you're walking. They're following you. They're having to follow you. They may get bored just looking at the podium and then looking at the slide, but watching you walk around, being a little animated, I think it helps keep the interest for the audience. So I think that's critically important for you to nail what style works for you. And there's no right or wrong. Again, you'll figure it out. You'll get to a certain comfort level after doing several ways, behind the podium or walking around. You'll figure out what works for you, and then you just go with it, you know. So that's important. And I guess the last point I want to get across about how to make a speech is um, the Q&A. You really, really, really need to make sure you bake in enough time in your speech for Q&A, because Q&A to me is the heart and soul of speeches. That's when you really engage with the audience. That's when you may get challenged on a point that you talked about so that you can have a conversation about it. That's where you can interject some humor, get something going on with the audience. And so I've seen too many occasions where the speech is supposed to be for an hour. The speaker's not cognizant of the time, and then it's like 5 minutes left. You maybe get one question or two. That's it. So usually I bake in. My speeches are no longer than 45 minutes, and then bake in if it's an hour. If I'm allocated an hour, then it gives me a good uh 15 minutes. If I get through the slides quicker than that, that's all the better. Um, so whether you have somebody, my former business manager, Samantha, one time when we didn't have monitor that was a countdown or something, she'd actually have she'd actually take pieces of paper, and write like, yeah, I'll do it right now. She'd write like so she'd take and say 15, right? So she'd say, so I got 15 minutes left, right? But whether it's that way or whether you make sure you're constantly looking at a clock if it's there, or whether you have the countdown timer, whatever it is, it's your responsibility to be disciplined enough to know that if you want a proper Q&A session, then cut your speech off at 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then do the time for the Q&A. And I think that it also shows respect to the audience, because a lot of people may want to ask questions, but if you run out of time because there's only 5 minutes for Q&A, you've kind of done them a disservice. So make sure as you're practicing your speeches or as you're delivering your speeches, you're cognizant of the time. And in terms of preparation, that's vitally important, right? Preparation is the key to any great speech. Now, uh, I've done speaking for so long now that if I pull up a deck that I've used before, I don't really have to prepare much, you know, just have to know a little bit about the audience, find out ahead of time, like what are they looking for, what kind of teaching points are they looking for. But if it's new content, yeah, I'm going to make sure I go over that, um, and go over that well, so that I'm well versed with what's coming up on the next slide deck. But again, the beauty for me is I don't have to memorize a lot of bullet points. I don't have to worry about notes. I can speak to the concepts, and then it just kind of flows from there. Preparation is the key. Sam and I used to spend, hours going over decks that I was going to give to make sure that I was comfortable with the content. I was, able to articulate what I wanted to articulate. So preparation is the key. If you're nervous about public speaking, one of the best things you can do is practice, practice, practice. Of course, doing the speeches, but practice beforehand so that you know the material cold. The last thing you want to do is get on that stage and think, oh God, I forgot that. What am I supposed to talk about on this slide? Or, or a slide comes up that, oh, I should have prepped because I don't remember what the slide, and audiences can tell if you're ready or not. You can't fake it. You're out there on a tightrope by yourself. So prepare, prepare, prepare. Proper preparation obviously will get you through that, especially if you're nervous. And if anybody tells you that they're never nervous before they speak, they're lying to you. Even at this stage in the game, I wouldn't call it so much nervousness. It's more like I want to get out there and do it. But there's always a feeling of, oh, you want to do well, and 15 minutes, half an hour before the speech, I'm thinking about, okay, I want to make sure I deliver it. I want to make sure I do a good job, and I know I've prepped. I don't get nervous anymore, but I do get kind of jazzed up and anxious. It's probably a better word to get out on stage and to deliver. Um, but again, that's okay, and use whatever techniques you want. Deep breathing. There's a great SEAL team breathing technique uh, that I've learned to incorporate, where you take, you breathe in and out 4 times, you hold it for a count of four, then breathe out. And so anything you can do, breathing exercises, uh, short meditation, something that do that kind of calms the nerves. If you know your material, then you should be good to go. And the other thing to remember is that a lot of speakers think that the audiences are there are trying to try to nail them. They're trying to make them look bad. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Typically, audiences are there because they want to learn something. You're there because you have content to give to them that will help them in their business endeavors, in their personal lives, in their development as a human being, as a professional. You have something to impart to them. They want that. So think of the audience as your allies, right? They're not there to throw stones at you and stuff, make fun of you. That's, I think, psychologically that a lot of speakers, especially at the beginning of their journey in public speaking, think that way. And now I go on stage looking at them as allies. We're all in this together for this next 60 minutes. I'm going to hopefully give you information that you can use. And with the give and take of the Q&A, I'm going to learn something also that I can take back with me. And that's if you want to verbalize it that way with the audience, which I often do, that's a great thing to do too, because it shows that you're not standing there as God Almighty imparting your wisdom and they don't know anything. No, you learn from each other. But just remember, the audience is they're on your side, right? And you think of it as they're on your side, and that helps really ratchet down the anxiety level. All right. So those are kind of my main thoughts about public speaking. Again, this was not about uh, how to, like when I did before, I talked about how I prepped for my very first major speech and setting up monitors and all that. Now this is more about when you get on stage, what are the things that you can do to maximize your ability to nail that speech, to get the audience engaged, and to make you continue to feel more and more comfortable with public speaking. You own it. Be comfortable in your own skin. You can get tips by watching other great speakers, but incorporate whatever they have to teach you into your own personality, your own persona, so you make it yours, right? Determine whether or not you want to use notes or just images to get your concepts across. Again, nothing is right or wrong. It depends what's good for you. Um, Use humor, but use it in a way that's natural. If you're not a natural joke teller like I am not, then don't do that. I do it off the cuff on the fly. But if you are really good at telling anecdotes and stories, by all means, just pop that into your portfolio and do it. Are you good behind a podium or are you good walking around? Right? Uh, that's that's totally up to you, and it's really something that you need to really develop on your own. Be disciplined enough to know what the time constraints are of your speech, so you have enough time for Q&A, right? And get that engagement going, because that really leaves a good taste in people's mouths when you have ample time to go back and forth and engage with people. Really makes them feel like they were part of this whole conversation. And then just figure out ways to prepare yourself to knock down the nervousness level, and to the point where when you get on stage, you're confident, you're ready to rock and roll. You want to be able to, you really want to get to the point where you can't wait to get on that stage. It's not that you loathe going on the stage. You can't wait to get on that stage, and just knock it out of the ballpark, which you will. So I hope that helps a little bit in your public speaking journey. I'd love to hear what you think about this podcast. If you have any questions, don't please, you can always ping me through my website, email, and just or obviously through the podcast, your comments, and just let me know how things are going with you in your own leadership journey. So that's all I have for this time. I'll try to get another podcast out soon. We are lining up other guests, and again, we're going to do some things that are different, um, that I think you will thoroughly enjoy. So until next time, this is Mike Howard and the Art of Ronin Leadership podcast. Take care, and we'll talk soon.